Welcome to Human Monsters. Despite all my rage, I am still just a rat in a cage. Smashing Pumpkins. Prologue. In the true crime community, we often get too comfortable with words like schizophrenia, personality disorder, and the criminally insane. So we decided to take a look at an institution that was specifically built to hold people who suffer from these afflictions. From the very beginning, we realized that the biographies of the people involved and the history of the place will have to be covered over a couple of episodes. Those of you who support us so loyally will also be getting an additional Patreon episode just from us to you to say thank you for the unwavering support you have shown. So, without further procrastination, let me take you to a place where the criminals are referred to as patients, and the line between madness, sanity, and whatever lies in between always feels a bit blurry. We take for granted that when the synapses in our brains spar to ignite fireworks in the form of thoughts, that the process would be simple, natural, and normal. But as we all know, the mind is a complicated vessel contained in a bowl of bone, with far too many secrets to reveal in our time on Earth. For the most part, if the chemicals, the biology, and personality is compatible, you can be an ordinary person with ordinary reasoning, but every now and again, the blend of mind, body, and soul can result in mental illness. Add to the mix abuse, addiction, and other environmental and physical challenges. It's a wonder there are not more human monsters walking the earth. About 40 miles from the center of London, England, is a place that is known for not so much its hospitality as its many celebrities who call it home. If you are expecting a stately manor or five-star hotel, I'm going to have to disappoint you. The stars of today's show all made newspaper headlines in their lifetime, but not for starring in a movie or being part of the royalty elite. As we travel to our destination, it's inevitable to not have your breath taken away by the rolling velvety hills, fringed by ferns and forest, all against a bright blue sky, trimmed with lacy white clouds on a rare sunny day. It's English rural landscape at its best, and Berkshire is no wallflower when it comes to foliage, flora, and fauna. As a matter of fact, the place we are visiting today happens to be in the middle of a nature reserve. Come with me as we vault time and space and go to a place where realities and perceptions seldom meet, where people are held against their will, not just by locks and barred windows, but by the voices in their heads and their own uncooperative minds. Let's go and meet some of the most prolific role players in British true crime history behind the walls of Broadmoor. The history of Broadmoor. As the oldest of three institutions in Britain for the mentally ill, Broadmoor was originally commissioned during the 1850s when a man called Roderick MacLean tried to assassinate Queen Victoria. To say we have come a long way in the last century with our methods of diagnosis and treatment of mental illness is the understatement of the millennium. Here are some of the reasons you could be put in an asylum: disagreeing with established religious views, epilepsy, menstruation, head wounds, being associated with other insane people, acute melancholy, violent reactions to physical abuse, religious enthusiasm, abandoning of husband, taking of contraceptives, incest, bestiality, immorality, ill treatment of husband, grief over action of the mind, and my favorite, novel reading. Personally, I just see a magnitude of reasons for husbands to get rid of unwanted wives, which is probably why Broadmoor's first patients in 1863 were 95 women. The first male patients would be admitted the following year. Although this blob of concrete on the picturesque English countryside has none of the charm of the Old Vic Theatre or the National Theatre, London, or Buckingham Palace, within these walls, stars were playing their part in the drama of life. Treatment has progressed from drilling a hole in a patient's skull and just moving the brain a bit around with a sharp object to electroconvulsive therapy, which was only since the 1950s been administered with anesthesia. Then there was the controversial insulin treatment, through which comas were induced, but in many cases resulted in seizures and even 44 deaths, to the good old lobotomy, which in essence is the removal of part of the patient's brain to make them more pliable. An estimated 15,000 in Britain would receive lobotomies before the method was deemed to have very poor results. The pharmaceutical industry also brought new hope to the mentally ill, and now with the combination of therapy and medication, being a patient at a psychiatric hospital is not necessarily a life sentence. But for most calling Broadmoor home, this life lived in suspended animation is indefinite. Still, Broadmoor is not a place for the faint of heart. When the National Health Service took over the running of the Victorian Institution in 1948, the clear distinction between criminals and patients was made. All criminals were viewed as patients, but not all patients were criminals. Despite the fact that the name changed from asylum to a hospital, violence is almost a daily occurrence, and most nurses have the build of linebackers. The most dangerous patients are kept in the high dependency ward, and when a door is opened, it's protocol that no less than 5 other staff members have to be with the medical staff member in case of a violent episode. If a patient is deemed too dangerous, they are given food and medication as well as any communication through a hole near the bottom of the door. Currently, staff have to undergo strict and extensive background checks. But that wasn't always the case, as you will see. There is one exit and entrance, and not even a cell phone is allowed through the airport-level security point of entry. Staff not only leave their belongings behind in this secretive and mysterious establishment. Behind these walls, they never discuss their private lives, and during their leisure time, most found it easier to say they work for the NHS and to leave it at that. Cameras provide an all-seeing eye, and staff hardly flinch anymore when the bruises and abrasions they endure almost daily have to be treated from the medical aid kit as a result of an encounter. To these men and women, it's all in a day's work. They don't distinguish between victim or perpetrator. All patients are to them just patients. Padded rooms where you can hear no one and no one can hear you made me realize I might be a little claustrophobic after all. Watching staff forcibly administer medication is just as haunting. 3 or 4 nurses, for the most part, very silent and focused, approach a patient with skill from years of training as the uncooperative patient loudly protests and fights. He or she kicks, punches, scratches, bites, and uses any weapon they can lay their hands on as staff bob and weave like a group of prize fighters. The hospital even has its own tactical unit, that is used about 30 times a year to subdue patients. These men and women who treat the fellow humans with the fractured minds are always fully aware that in one moment the winds can shift and a passive patient can, in an instant, turn into a violent offender. Treating mentally ill patients is always expensive, but at £300,000 per year per patient, it's understandable that the taxpayer has a bee in its bonnet about keeping cold-hearted killers here, especially if you consider that it costs a third of the price to keep a prisoner locked up in jail. There is a saying that goes, there is time, and then there is Broadmoor time. It might be because most patients are held there indefinitely, but I do feel that there is a sense of timelessness to this place, so drenched in mystery and history. Despite all the signs that you are in a hospital, the constant jingle-jangle of huge bunches of keys reminds you that these are no ordinary hospital hallways. For the last 150 years, within these walls, the most outrageous and notorious of villains were housed, not just for their own safety, but for the well-being of society. Granted, we've come a long way since the Victorian era, when bloodletting and leeches were chosen methods of treatment. To cure an illness that is not visible to the naked eye and does not present itself in the form of a wound is a massive challenge. If the illness causes the patient to rape, kill, fight, destroy, and cause utter bedlam, people's lives could actually be in danger. Let me introduce you to some of the most famous guests of the oldest psychiatric institution in Britain. Let's go and meet some of the famous boarders of Broadmoor. Jack the Ripper. Between August and November 1888, the bodies of 5 women in London's impoverished district of Whitechapel were discovered murdered and badly mutilated. All the victims were sex workers, and the disembowelment and other degradations of the body indicated that the culprit must have had some knowledge about anatomy. But since no other clear evidence was available, police believed the killer might be a doctor. Fear lay thick in the foggy streets of London, and no one had a clue who the sadistic killer could be. Police often got it wrong, but every time a suspect was identified, they were sent to Broadmoor for evaluation. For a very long time, people believed this was the handiwork of a man called James Kelly, and to this day, many true crime sleuths believe he is the only viable suspect. James Kelly was born on the 20th of September 1860, and apart from the fact that his mother abandoned him to be raised by his grandmother, there are no red flags in his youth. His mother did make amends by putting £20,000 into a trust which he could receive when he turned 25. He was, however, described as argumentative, short-tempered, and violently impulsive, without much provocation. His temper would go from 0 to 360 in seconds. His dynamite-fueled disposition made him a difficult employee at the furniture upholstery factory where he worked. I have no doubt he was an abusive partner. When he married wife Sarah, his violent temper just increased. His jealousy took on a compulsive tone, and he often berated and scolded the demure young woman. His angry outbursts would eventually cost him his job. The wheels came off the wedding wagon rather quickly after the marriage, and on the 21st of June 1883, just 17 days after saying their vows, he would slit her throat. She would survive the attack for only 3 days. Kelly was originally deemed sane and found guilty. He was ordered to be hanged. His previous employer, however, testified that he was not in charge of all his faculties, and Kelly was sent to Broadmoor indefinitely. For 5 years, Kelly was a model patient in the psychiatric ward, but on the 23rd of January 1888, using a key he fabricated himself, he escaped. For about 40 years, he seemed to have just disappeared. What he did and where he went, no one knows for sure, but many speculate that he was Jack the Ripper. On the 12th of February 1927, Kelly returned to Broadmoor out of his own free will and asked to be admitted again, stating, "I am very tired and I want to die with my friends." He would die 2 years later on the 17th of September 1929, leaving behind memoirs that shined a bit of light on this lost soul. He absolutely hated prostitutes and claimed to be in the Whitechapel area during the murders. That makes him one of the top likely candidates for the title of Jack the Ripper. Kidnapping a princess. Our next celebrity did not make massive waves, but his one misdeed did land him a place in our history books. On the evening of the 20th of March, 1974, a man named Ian Ball decided to kidnap a princess. A maroon and black Austin limousine carried Princess Anne back to Buckingham Palace when a man with a beard and light red hair drove his white Ford Escort in front of the royal vehicle, blocking its passage. Ian Ball went there to steal away the third in line to succeed the throne. She and her husband, Mark Phillips, had only been married for 4 months and were returning from a royal celebrity event. With them in the car were the chauffeur, the lady-in-waiting, and 31-year-old James Beaton, an ex-police officer in charge of the princess' security. Unsure of what to expect, James got out of the car, as the driver of the other vehicle did the same. Ian shot James when he was about 6 meters away in the shoulder, with one of the 2 firearms he was carrying. James tried to fire, but first he missed and then his gun jammed. Ian went for the car door and into a tug-of-war between him and the couple. The young man, Ian, told them to open or he would shoot, as the lady-in-waiting escaped through the other door. James, wounded, got back into the car and put his body between the couple and the kidnapper. Ian shot at him again, this time shattering his hand. He then shot James in the chest, after which James collapsed out of the car onto the ground, completely incapacitated. The chauffeur then decided to get out of the car, but James shot him as well. Ian managed to get the door open and pulled the princess by her arm, saying, "Please come out, you've got to come." The feisty princess retorted with, "Not bloody likely." As a struggle ensued and the princess resisted being kidnapped, a 22-year-old polite constable called Michael Hills heard the commotion and thought it was just a little road rage. Ian shot him in the stomach, but he was able to radio back to the station. John Brian McConnor had been following in a taxi, and as he got out of his car, he said, "These are my friends. Don't be silly, old boy. Put the gun down." Ian shot him in the chest. Ian by now had shot 4 men, but he finally met his match when former heavyweight boxer Ron Russell showed up on the scene. He punched Ian on the back of the head, and Ian tried to shoot at him, but missed. This gave the princess time to escape. As Ian aimed his gun at Ron again, he connected him hard on the jaw, and the fight was over. The princess told Ian to go ahead and make a run for it. He did, but by now police were everywhere, and he was swiftly arrested. Listening to the account of the failed kidnapping, It's impossible to miss the dry, stiff upper lip character of the royals, as Princess Anne would describe the attack as, quote, tedious and annoying. All 4 gunshot victims would survive and be awarded medals for their bravery by the Queen. In his vehicle, police found handcuffs, tranquilizers, and a note demanding a £2 million ransom. He would later claim that he was going to donate the money to the National Health Service. He requested that the money should be placed in £5 note denominations, to be placed in 20 suitcases, and flown to Switzerland. He was tried, found guilty, and sent to Broadmoor, and he, according to all available sources, is still a patient at the institution. The last scoundrel we cover today is one of the most famous patient residents of Broadmoor. Unlike the crimes of Ian Ball, not only did he kill repeatedly, but also rape, maim, injure, and terrify the women of England. The Yorkshire Ripper. When police finally captured the Yorkshire Ripper, many stood staring at him through the one-way glass in disbelief. Slightly stocky and of average height, he looked nothing like the monster they had so feverishly been hunting over a period of 4 years, in an investigation that would be the most expensive Britain up to that point had ever had. 2 tiny facts that will put the magnitude of the investigation into focus is that, for instance, 250,000 people would be interviewed and 16 million pieces of mail would be scrutinized. If they expected an unnatural beast, the result was disappointing to say the least. Peter Sutcliffe was just an ordinary guy, slightly good-looking with a wife, mortgage, and an average suburban life, working as a truck driver. He could be your neighbor or your co-worker, but as the evidence slowly falls into place and the puzzle pieces form a picture, there is no doubt that they have the Yorkshire Ripper in custody. Flanked by 5 major cities, each with their own identity, Yorkshire County would be the place where Peter Sutcliffe would commit a series of horrific crimes. Born outside Bradford on the 2nd of June 1946, he was one of 6 siblings. He was born prematurely and was described as a weak, meek, and underdeveloped child. His father was an alcoholic and beat his mother on the regular in front of the children. Peter absolutely adored her and worshipped the ground she walked on. He had a couple of run-ins with authorities, including stealing a car when he was 18. When he was 23, he was arrested when, after being questioned about idling in a known area for illicit activities with his lights on, he sped away. After being caught during a short pursuit, a hammer was found in his car. He was also arrested when he stole car tires from his employer when he was 29. But none of these crimes would allude to the devastation he would cause later. When researching this case, I was struck again by how similar his attacks were to the Beast of Jersey, while Ken Kroll, Peter Curtin, and even Arthur Shawcross, all sexual sadists we have covered in previous episodes. According to Peter, his sexually sadistic nature was triggered when first known victim Wilma McCann first mocked him when he did not know how to solicit sex from a prostitute, and then again when he could not get an erection. She left her home and children on the 25th of October, 1976, to earn some money. She found herself in a car in an abandoned stretch near the Prince Philip football field one evening, when Peter beat her skull in and then cut her throat. She was found the following morning by a milkman and his brother. Her pants had been pulled down, her jacket and blouse ripped, and her bra pulled up. She was still clutching her handbag. She had obviously been murdered where she was found, and after she had been struck twice, she had been stabbed. The killer had masturbated over her body, but apart from the semen stain, very little was available as far as clues were concerned. Wilma was 28 years old and his first confirmed kill. 8 weeks and 5 days later, 48-year-old Emily Jackson would be murdered by Peter as her husband sat drinking in a pub, waiting for her. He was well aware she did sex work, and after not finding her outside, assumed she had picked up a customer. His signature of pulling down clothing and masturbating over the body was prevalent, but this time the attack was much more brutal. Despite an unsympathetic attitude towards sex workers, officers started their search into identifying the weapon used in bludgeoning of her skull, as well as the stab wounds they found on her. A new clue was also the imprint of a boot found near the body. Unfortunately, the investigation was not seen as that important, since the victim was a sex worker, and it would take more violence before police would ramp up their efforts to catch the killer. Marcella Clarkson was attacked on the 9th of May. Sutcliffe forced her into his car and attacked her with a blunt object. The woman, who was 3 months pregnant at the time, would survive the blows, but would lose her baby. She would later recall how he whispered that she should not tell the police, masturbate over her, and then drop a 5-pound note on her. She had 8 different skull lacerations. She would describe her attacker as a man of average height with dark hair and a beard. The body of Irene Richardson was found in a park after she left her home on the 5th of February 1977 to visit a friend. Her clothes were in disarray. She was first beaten over the head with a hammer and then stabbed with what seems to be a very sharp knife. Police executed a fingertip search of the park, but this yielded nothing new. Registration numbers were being taken down of suspicious vehicles, and door-to-door inquiries were being made. But police had the added burden that sex workers did not trust the police. This was just one of so many reasons why Peter Sutcliffe got away with what he was doing for so long. The last time anyone saw Patricia Atkinson on the 23rd of April 1977 was when she was ejected out of the Carlisle Hotel after trying to perform a strip show in a drunken stupor. The 32-year-old woman was beaten, stabbed, and her clothes once again were in disarray. This time a clear boot print was visible in blood on her bed sheets. The attack had occurred as she entered the room, and Peter had then dragged her body onto the bed to continue his assault. Panic was setting in, and by now the crimes had made national headlines. His attack on 16-year-old Jane MacDonald was out of character, since the cheerful and sweet girl was not a sex worker. She made the fatal mistake of returning home on the 26th of June 1977 after missing the last bus home. Her house happened to only be meters away from Wilma McCann's home. Jane's body would be found with 3 blows to the head, covered in rubbish near a playground. She had been stabbed many times and received at least 3 blows to the head. This attack seemed to intensify the search for the monster. The investigation was accumulating a tremendous amount of paperwork, and officers were working 13 hours a day to solve the crimes, some even sleeping at the station, convinced the Yorkshire Ripper would strike again. Her innocence shifted perceptions of the Yorkshire Ripper, and he was now known, and he suddenly became everyone's public enemy number 1. All Maureen Long, aged 42, could tell officers when she woke up in the hospital was that she had attended a dance hall and her last memory was of her going into the cloakroom. Her cries for help would lead to her being found in an abandoned structure. She joked that the only reason she did not die of hypothermia was the amount of beer she drank. She would spend 9 weeks in hospital recovering from her injuries. In an odd way to get sex workers off the streets, police started arresting them on sight, causing even more distrust and uncooperative potential witnesses. On the 1st of October, 20-year-old Joan Jordan was murdered in Manchester as the Ripper expanded his reign of terror. She was found naked 9 days later. Her handbag was found further away with a brand new 5-pound note in it. It would later emerge that Peter had returned to the scene to look for that note, since he knew it would somehow be linked to him. As if the multiple blows to her skull and stab wounds were not enough, he tried to saw off her head, but was unsuccessful. He did this after returning to the body to find the 5-pound note he had given her, but she was crafty enough to hide this crucial piece of evidence in a secret compartment in her handbag. It would be survivor Marilyn Moore who would give investigators later the best description of her attacker. She was found behind an abundant factory. A man calling himself David had solicited sex from her, and the last thing she remembered was getting into the back of his car. On the 14th of December 1977, she was bashed over the head. Something must have spooked him because he abandoned the attack and took off. Like many other victims, she would receive immediate neurosurgery. She would describe her attacker as having a Jason King mustache, referring to a fictional character of the time. She described him as a good-looking man with a tan and curly hair who was soft-spoken. Along with Maureen Long, she would undergo hypnosis and become the best witness for the prosecution after Peter's capture. 18-year-old twin sisters, Helen and Rita Rita, were working near a public toilet block on the 31st of January 1978 when they were both picked up in 2 separate vehicles and returned in 2 separate vehicles. The drop-offs had no more than a 5-minute difference, but when Rita returned to the toilet block, her sister was gone. She returned to the flat they shared, but Helen was nowhere in sight. 2 days later, she reported her sister missing. She would be found 80 meters away from the toilet block, covered with an asbestos sheet, with 6 lacerations to her skull and multiple stab wounds. The perpetrator had returned to the scene of the crime, and it would be the first time he had tried to conceal his crime. A £10,000 reward was offered, which would eventually be increased to £20,000. The last time Yvonne Pearson was seen live was when she left the Flying Dutchman pub on the 21st of January 1978, stating that she was off to make some money after having a couple of drinks. Her body was found 2 months later when someone observed an arm sticking out of an abandoned sofa. A newspaper with the date the 21st of February was found under her hand, and a ball of coarse horsehair was found in her mouth. Her skull was completely demolished. On the 16th of May 1978, Vera Millward left for the shops and then to go to the hospital because she had been complaining about problems with her stomach. Her body was found the following day on the hospital grounds, and despite the property being private, it was notorious for being frequented by sex workers and their clients. Peter went dormant for a while, but on the 9th of April 1979, he attacked Josephine Whitaker after the 19-year-old left her home following an argument with her mother. She spent some time at her grandparents' house, who tried to persuade her to stay for the night, and we can assume that it was on her way back from their place that the attack took place, less than a mile from their home. Once again, her clothing had been tampered with, and the body had clearly been moved. Her body was found the next morning, and her family would unfortunately find out when her brother passed the crime scene and recognized her shoes. Her skull had been fractured by several blows, and this time a new unidentified weapon had been used to stab her. Once again, the same Wellington boot print was found on the scene, and this time Peter had bitten his victim, and a clear bite mark was visible. The search for the new weapon was intensified, and cops searched everywhere from factories to slaughterhouses, looking for the instrument of death with its distinctive shape. What complicated the investigation even more was the arrival of 2 letters and a cassette tape that had been supposedly sent by the Yorkshire Ripper. When profiler Robert Ressler came to assist from the FBI, he finally told the lead investigators that the letters and tape were a hoax. Hundreds of man-hours had already been wasted in trying to identify the mail from Sunderland. The sender was eventually identified as John Humble, and he would spend 8 years in prison for this cruel prank that would cost the taxpayer hundreds of thousands of pounds in billboards and other advertising mediums. It was a debacle that would be just one more misstep in the investigation that could have ended much, much earlier. Apart from completely ignoring the best composite of Peter they could ever have hoped for, his name had been indexed wrongly, and he would eventually, during the course of the investigation, be interviewed a staggering 9 times. Scotland Yard would eventually make recommendations, and streaming the investigation by reducing the massive amount of paperwork that was consuming so much valuable time. "22-year-old Barbara Leach decided that, despite the rain, she would walk home from her local pub on the 1st of September 1979. She would be reported missing the following day. 2 days later, her body would be found under a carpet and some loose rocks. By now, the signature head wounds were recognizable, but this time they had a greasy substance on them. Detective Ridgway could not shake the feeling that their culprit could be identified through the £5 note. In an unprecedented move, he convinced the bank manager to print the exact amount of banknotes, and the notes were identified as having belonged to one of 6,000 people who were paid from the specific batch. Peter Sutcliffe was one of these people. By the time he was arrested, that number had been narrowed down to 241, but not before the Yorkshire Ripper caused more death and devastation. After more attacks during which victims survived, 20-year-old Jacqueline Hill would be viciously attacked. Peter did not care anymore who his victims were, and the timid Sunday school teacher was described as a genuinely good and gentle person. Her body would be found on the 17th of November 1980, north of Leeds. Her head had been bashed in, and her stab wounds seemed to have been made by a chisel. Despite the countless man-hours put into the investigation, police seemed to be no closer to finding the serial killer. Even then, Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher put pressure on the Home Secretary to assist in the finding of the murderer. Protest marches reflecting the displeased nature of the public with regards to the investigation became a regular event. The pressure was so intense that Detective Oldfield, who had been one of the lead investigators, had a heart attack and needed to remove himself from the investigation. 4 of the top investigators were chosen to lead it further, and the very first thing they did was to dispel the hoax letters and tape. They revisited crime scenes, and every viable lead was once again scrutinized. By carefully studying the map marking where each attack took place and where the bodies were found, they identified the center of gravity, aka his home base, as Bradford. This matched the statements that the attacker had an accent from this specific area. It would, however, be the stopping of a suspicious vehicle that would give investigators their final break. On the evening of the 2nd of January 1981, officers noticed a suspicious-looking Ford Escort in the driveway of an abandoned steelworks factory. They knew the man who called himself John Williams could only be there for one reason. He was arrested for suspicion of theft, since the number plates did not match his vehicle and would also be identified as Peter Sutcliffe. It's important to note that when Peter was arrested on April 1980 and released on bail, he would kill his last two victims. Fortunately, this time around, police were acutely aware of the similarities between the identikit and the man in front of them. In a bizarre twist, when he was searched, he was found to be wearing an inverted sweater that would effectively expose his genitals. This just added to the mounting circumstantial evidence, and soon Sonia, Peter's wife's claims that her husband was with her on certain dates attacks took place was rubbished. The only remorse he would show after confessing was murdering Jane MacDonald, and his only request was that he himself tell his wife that he indeed was the Yorkshire Ripper. He was charged with 13 murders and 7 assaults, and tried very hard for the insanity plea, but after 3 psychiatrists could not agree, he was deemed fit to stand trial. He desperately tried to claim that the voice of God had spoken to him when he was a gravedigger and working in the cemetery, but he would be found guilty in the Old Bailey and sentenced to 20 life sentences in Parkhurst Prison. To say his 2-month stay in prison was unpleasant is an understatement. He was attacked and beaten every day, and placing him in isolation could not prevent him from being abused. Whether he was faking his unhinged psyche or whether the diagnoses by doctors of possible paranoid schizophrenia was actually true, we do not know. But he made claims such as that he met the Queen in a bar. Peter would be secretively ushered away in the middle of the night on the 27th of March, 1984, from Parkhurst to Broadmoor. He would continue to be attacked during his stay at the institution, but not to the extent of the beatings he took in Parkhurst. For the first 9 years, he refused treatment. Shockingly, Peter would have the biggest mailbag of all the patients at the institution. Women from far and wide would write, either to elicit letters to be sold later, or because the way some find Ted Bundy handsome, they found Peter Sutcliffe attractive and alluring. He focused most of his time, even in his old age, writing feverishly in a juvenile fashion to his admirers. He was allowed 4 visitors a week, and they consisted of young women holding his hand and stroking his arm. Some would even threaten action by their solicitors when staff told them they could not bring their children on visits for obvious reasons. In a recorded phone call with his brother Carl, a 70-year-old Peter could be heard speaking about the latest young admirer that planned to visit him, indicating that this pervert had not changed one bit, and the courts would agree, ruling in August 2016 that he should serve the remainder of his sentence in Franklin Prison. It's at times like these that I feel a huge sadness for the silent victims of these criminals, namely their own family members. During his last conversation with his brother, Carl would let the supportive family member role slip for a moment and tell Peter he wishes he had been given the death sentence. Considering the harassment and torment anyone even slightly related to this pervert had to suffer, I don't blame him for wishing his brother dead long ago. He would eventually die there on the 11th of February 2020 after refusing to be treated for COVID. And with that disturbing tale, we end the first part of our series of the Broadmoor Hall of Fame. Peter Sutcliffe's name will be popping up more than once in the following episodes. And I can give you my word, you horror hounds will not be disappointed. So join us in 2 weeks' time as we tell the tales of those behind the walls of England's oldest psychiatric institution. Please feel free to email us or leave your comments on our socials. We love hearing from you. This episode was written by Misdemeanor. Before I go, I'm going to leave you with a clip from the Ben Hatchett show, where he discusses Broadmoor with someone who is an expert on the place.
With the mental health thing now, obviously Broadmoor is, for those who don't know, and again, I'm not massive on prison. I don't really know a lot, but obviously I've done a little bit of research. I know Broadmoor is a prison for people suffering mental health. I think is the word like, is it, in fact, am I saying this wrong?
Go on. It's a high secure unit for it's for the criminally insane, isn't it? That's let's be real. You know what I mean? That's what it is. There's 3 high secure hospitals in the country. You know, they're like the top max secure prisons. Like when prisons can't handle someone, that's where they send them more. If someone's like, it's either for the killers or wrong-uns or just people like the prison can't handle. Like your Charlie Bronsons, your Crays went there, and do you get what I'm sort of saying? All your serial killers go there. It's end of the earth. It's hell on earth. It's end of the line, hell on earth.
Really? So that's how it's looked at. It's pretty much it's hell. And when you say it's hell on earth, you're speaking from experience. What do you mean? What do you mean by that?
There's another guy who come out and many years ago he wrote a book, and Liam knows him. Liam's filmed with him. His name was Roy Pretty Boy Shaw. He had the classic fight with Lenny McLean. British history.
He's a bare knuckle boxer. Was he?
Bare knuckle. He had the biggest unlicensed fight with Lenny McLean, the governor. They had like 3 battles. Yeah.
Oh, I think I went down a rabbit hole of watching all those old fights.
Yeah, they had British history, bro. I mean, it's classic. And Roy Shaw, he went to Broadmoor and he wrote a book about it. And I tell everyone, this is Roy Shaw now. And there's a quote what he said about being in Broadmoor. He said, "The nicest thing I can say about Broadmoor is I survived it."
Wow.
And like you know what I mean? I support that quote.
Again,
hell,
bro, I've never been to jail or anything like that.
There's jail and then there's Broadmoor.
Then it's Broadmoor.
Do you get what I'm saying?
Yeah,
Broadmoor, like, it's end of the line, bro. And like I said to you, I was involved. There's a cover up which will come out on Amazon. Like, will come on Prime. I was involved with a big cover up there. We was getting mistreated. This ain't just me saying it. There's actually a whistleblower. Staff come out. There's things online saying there was a cover up. We was being mistreated and dual diagnosed. Because people think like the reason I actually got kicked out of there, that there's a reason behind it. I didn't do it for any other reason. It was about what was going on. Sometimes you have to make a stand for right and wrong in life, and what was going on there was wrong at the time. I knew by me taking a stand I was going to get into a lot of trouble, but what was happening at that time was wrong. And do I regret doing what I did in Broadmoor? Absolutely not. I made a big stand. What had to be made. I got punished severely. But it is what it is. And, there's whistleblowers come out from their own staff, and that's all on the internet if you want to check it, cover up, and that's all out there.
We'll get into that a little bit more. But for people who are a little bit naive to like the prison system and prisons in general, what would you say is the difference between like a normal prison to Broadmoor? Like what's apart from obviously the people, your codees or whatever?
Yeah, all right, I'll give you one. I'll give you an example. I've got an example here. So I've been in Broadmoor, 3-4 weeks. I got stabbed in hot water. Obviously, the geezer hot water and stabbed me in the back. And do you know why he did that?
Why?
Because he thought I was a zombie.
Wow.
There you go.
Wow, so,
okay. There you go.
So now we're dealing with obviously mentally unstable people who are violent. So it's like so. Can you set the scene? So like obviously, what was the like lockup? What was the bang up? How often were you allowed to kind of communicate with other prisoners? And
it all kind of depends, really. It depends. Like you go on admission, you go there, you start on an admission ward, and you sort of down there take all your shoelace, not like shoelace and that. There, you got to remember, people have been killed in Broadmoor, guys. Like the cannibal geezer. What was his name? I used to call him. Oh, I'm gonna sound really bad now. That's how I used to wind him up. I did actually. The cannibal. I used to wind him up, and Peckish Pete. I used to call him. His name was Pete. Peckish Pete.
Yeah.
I had a bit of beef with him years ago, and I used to wind back. He killed someone anyway with shoelace on the ward. So you're not on the admission ward. You're not allowed any shoelace because people have been killed before with shoelace. So you go on the admission ward, not have shoelace and all that. You get a lot more staff. You're getting watched. It's just doomy. It's you've got people pacing and you've got people talking, you've got him, mate, it's just edgy.
What's like, what's the cells like? How they like, I don't know.
It's all like built in, structured, built in. There's nothing like sort of movable. And even like in like a communal area, Like this chair, you could pick that chair up in it, Jay.
Mm.
Well, there's no way you're picking the chair up in the Broadmoor community ward, bro. They're like fucking ton, mate. Do you know what I mean? Yeah, because
like
it's all weapons and that. You know, like the TV in the community where it's all like boxed off and all that, bro.
That's mad.
Do you get what I'm sort of saying? It's very like it's high risk, bro. You remember, and at the same time, it's very patronising as well. Like as I tell people, I never felt equal. Like even now, I still deal, trying to deal with the whole feeling equal thing and that, because when you're put down so much and then when you pipe up and that, you remember these guys puts needles in your ass and that, bro. They acrophage you.
So that's what I was going to ask about. So obviously, like they must forcibly try and administer medicine. And things
That's
like
one of the
that.
main things, especially like with me. I was there for mostly like I was just too problematic for the prison system. So for me, they wanted to medicate me.
Oh, so you didn't actually go straight to Broadmoor. You were actually kicked out of another prison into Broadmoor.
Bro, I got kicked out of about 5 prisons, Jamie, bro.
Was that for your scuffing?
I was just on it. I just did many protests. Obviously, the Winchester roof protest was one of my famous ones. I did the Winchester roof. I've spoke about it, so I can talk about this one because it's already out there.
Okay.
I did the Winchester roof protest. So yeah, that was me.
So what was that? Break that down, because I don't know.
Well, I was in the seg. They fucked up. Like literally, I had a beef with a family. Goes back from another prison. Obviously, where I got slashed, and something happened to the other fella. But anyway, I got transferred to Winchester, and I had a bit of a beef. I had a bit of an altercation with his family. Something happens. I was in the segregation, so I used to walk around. Segregation's the block. I don't know if your audience will relate to it. It's like the naughty bit in the prison. So when you're naughty, you go down to the block, and it's like literally 4 walls and a bed, and that's it. And you're locked up 24/7. You might be able to go in a little exercise yard or use your phone like a couple of times a week, but that's it. It's shit, bro. Like it's shit. So anyway, I was walking around in the yard and that, yeah. So you got a yard. It's a bit bigger than this, James. It's a bit bigger than this room. It's and then there's like where your roof is, like a metal mesh, like a big metal rail. Do you know what I mean? It's sort of like it's like a cage.
Yeah.
So it's brick and then the top. So it's like a cage, isn't it? So you're walking around and you can see the fresh air up there, yeah. But when you're going out there so long, you notice everything. And I don't know, they had like workers. They had like workers in that day, and I noticed that there's like when this metal meshing with like what's that thing called? Hose, but not drain pipe. When that sort of drain pipe goes like under the sort of like gate bit. I know that's not locked. I thought, no, I'm tripping. So I done like another lap round. I'm walking round and I'm looking in it because don't forget there's like a screw. There's a staff sort of like outside, indoors, sort of like keeping an eye. You make sure you're not doing anything mad every now and then. So I didn't want to be like standing there staring at it, like baiting it. You go, what the fuck are you looking? You know what I mean? Like, so playing it cool. Walk around. I've looked again. Bro, that's open. Like no one's locked. There's no lock on this gate. And I'm no way. Like my adrenaline started going. Like straight away, I've gone into naughty mind, innit? Like what can I do? I can do something mischievous here, innit? Do you get what I mean? Like, it's either that or I'm going back to a cell for 24 hours a day. Like this is in June or July, bro. This is in the summer. This is beaming hot. Like 2010 or something, something like that, or 2011 or something. It's hot. And I'm like, wow, like fucking hell, like, I could do something here. And I thought, do I risk it? If I got that pipe and he clots me, that's not open. Like, I'm gonna like, you know what I mean? He's gonna like, that's not gonna go down well, isn't it? But yeah, they had workers in that day, and I think they must have fucked up or something because there was no locking. So when I gone round setting time, I've just gone boom up it, Spider-Man quick time, bruv, up, popped through. There it was, went up further up, and I hit the main roof of Winchester Prison.
No,
that was me. Yeah.
So what happens then? Like what happens then? You made it to the roof. Was it kind of a thing? You knew. Like you weren't climbing that drain pipe to escape, or were you? Or was it?
No, you can't escape. You couldn't escape. You weren't escaping from that bit. No, there was nothing to escape. It was just. It's hot. They made a mistake, you know what I mean? Like, I'm
taking advantage. There's not a lot to do.
There's nothing you can do with it. It's like, well, do I go back to the cell, or do I go sit on the roof and and you probably get sunburn? Which I did get sunburn as well. Bro. I got fucking.
How long were you up there?
Hours, bro.
I
stayed up there till night time, innit?
No,
because the alarm started going, "That's your man," and then all of a sudden they bring in like these special people, like trained people, like professional negotiators, and they bring in these like I've been playing a bit of Call of Duty recently. Tactical squad. They're not a tactical squad. Not like they're like staff, but especially sort of trained in these sort of like situations. These sort of when these things kicked off. Not all them prisoner staff all have to do courses to be trained in certain aspects of what happens. So they have to come in. We call them in the prison the Mufti team. You might see them with the shields.
I've heard that. Yeah,
that's the terminology for like the they get all the uniform. The Mufti. I don't know why they call them. We just call them the Mufti team, and then they bring in like a professional negotiator and all that lot. And I had this professional negotiator and he come in and you're talking to him. I did a few protests before, like I've done barricades, I've did obviously alleged other things. And so anyway, like, so I know you don't get nothing. They just come in and try and calm you down, talk you down to come down. Oh, bro, I wasn't coming down. I was saying, I was up there, I was committed. There's no way I was coming down. So I just thought I'd just talk shit with this negotiator. At least I've got someone to talk to, innit? Like,
could they like, they can't creep up behind you and grab you to...
No, because I was so high up. So basically, where I was so high up, they weren't allowed to come up because it's like it's risk
and safety.
Yeah, health and safety. My life, their life. Do you get what I'm saying? Not like I'm doing anything to them. Like, you know, I ripped all these bricks and that, but I never threw at the staff because I wasn't there at the end of the day. They was there to do a job. I know I've had more altercations with staff in the prison there, but you know they've still got families and that. There's no one going to sit and throw bricks at them and all that. Like I could have seriously hurt them. They're there to do a job. You know, they're on the other side to me. And they're, you know what I mean? Like, if I don't like them, well, I shouldn't be there. You know what I mean? It's one of them, innit? I'm not there. They're there to do a job and that. I've had altercations with them in the past, you know, a bit on both sides. But see, I ripped it all up a little bit because I had the whole prison, Winchester Prison, could see me on this bit of roof. Everyone's shouting my name, bro. I tell you what, I know what it's like to be like a movie star.
Oh, really? So that's
they were shouting my name, bro. They were cheering me on and all this, like, do you know what I mean? It's entertaining for them, innit? It's all like, you know what I mean? So I was up there, I was having a bit just chilling out. They got the negotiator, they're down, they're talking. She can start shout and talk, and they was like, "Look, what do you want? Freedom? You know what I mean? You ain't getting it." Like, so I just chat shit.
Could you say, like, for instance, say what you want? Could you say, like, I want a McDonald's now?
Yeah. You can ask for whatever you want. You ain't getting shit. You know what I mean? You can ask for whatever you want. You don't get nothing. So anyone who think about it, you do not get nothing. Because I just sort of took the piss. So I said, "Look, I'll tell you what I'll do. You want me to come down?" They said, "Yeah." I said, "What do you want, Mr. Thatcher?" I said, "I'll tell you what. You get me this, I'll definitely come down." They're like, "Okay, what's that?" I said, "If you get me an Elvis Presley impersonator singing Faith by George Michael, I'll come down." That's why I went to fucking Broadmoor, bro.
Oh, really?
That's just one of them many things. When you say things like that, bro, it doesn't look good, does it? Yeah, you know what I mean? So they're like, "What? You're off key." And
what would be like a normal punishment for doing something like what you done?
Oh, some segregation, bro.
Really? You wouldn't get like extra time in your sentence or anything?
Yeah, you did. You could do. Yeah, I think, you know, with the damage and all that. If I just did the roof, maybe not like it. With the damage and I did, you'd probably get extra time. And you know, especially if you started trying to throw bricks at them.
Yeah,
a lot more fucking time, innit? Yeah, next sort of shit. Like, but no, with that, but I was going off key and I was getting mentally unwell in that at the time. Do you know what I'm sort of saying? So,
do you find obviously being in prison, and I mean it might be a simple question and it answers itself because obviously prison has stresses. Do you feel like being in prison heightened your, or kind of, I don't know, made your mental health really come to?
Yeah, but I give up. Listen, I come out, you know, and I didn't have anything. I had no dreams. I had no goals. I had no vision. I had no purpose. I didn't have anything. I didn't know what to do with myself in that jail. I got caught up in that bullshit lifestyle. When I was 20, my crimes had only got worse because my networking got worse. Do you get what I'm sort of saying? So the crimes getting heavier, and you know, I was about that. And you know, when I went away and I went away too, I just give up. I just lost hopes. And when I was fighting the system, and it felt like a release. Do you know what I mean? All this sort of chaos was normal to me. Do you know what I mean? I found comfort in all the chaos. When I was up there causing dramas, I was relieved. Do you know what I mean? It was just, it sounds crazy, bro, but it's so true. It was like my therapy. Yeah.
Obviously, you're in a different world. Like people, it's very hard to understand it from the outside until you're in that world. But I hear what you're saying.
Yeah,
I hear what you're saying.
I just found peace in the chaos. Do you know what I mean? But then it was, but the things just got sort of worse and worse. And then obviously, you know, there was an escape attempt, but no one that one. But then it was the Broadmoor. But then there was no.
So that directly after that incident,
there's a couple things after that. And yeah, it wasn't long. And I'll tell you what, yeah, every time I was getting moved, and I said about that song. Every time, literally, bro. Because when you go in like a sweatbox. Like we called it the sweatbox. It's called a prison bus. And they got like a radio station that they have in the front. And do you know what? They used to like play like Heart FM and all that.
Yeah.
Do you know what song used to always come on, bro?
God.
Faith, George Michael.
No way.
Swear down. Every journey. Every fucking journey.
See?
Yeah, I know. It was a sign though, bro, innit? I was going to need all the faith I was going to have, bro, going to Broadmoor, mate. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, let's talk about that. So obviously, this prison that you're about to enter for the criminally insane, what's going through your mind at these points now, bro?
It's like 21 years old, bro, isn't it? It's like 21. Do you get what I'm sort of saying? And like we all heard I heard the stories and I read the books, you know, the Bronson, the Craze, and the serial killers there. You had the proper wrongers there. You had I knew, like obviously I thought, don't really know what to think, bro. Do you get what I'm sort of saying? Like, it's
And your mind, I'd imagine at that time probably wasn't in the
no,
right
it wasn't in the best. It wasn't in the best as well. Like I was saying, I was young, and when man's not got no hope or nothing at that sort of age and that, bro. Like, I'd given up, man. Do you know what I mean? I stopped talking to family and outs and life, little family I had and my friends. I'd give up, man. I just absolutely just give up. So it was like, even kind of to the point of not caring. That's the sadness of it. I was just a broken guy. Like, I always had a good heart, and I know some of the things that I always had a good heart, but I was always kind of misunderstood, and I misunderstood things myself, and I didn't have any sort of like anything in life. I always felt like a bit an alien. I didn't really know what I was doing myself, and I was just a mess. So when I was going there, it was just sort of like, well, I'm done, innit?
That's mad, bro. That is mad. So obviously being in Broadmoor now and kind of getting used to the surroundings and everything like that. What kind of a person did it turn you into? And like obviously you had a few altercations in there because you hold this. In fact, it's probably a good time to talk about it. You hold a kind of a title. I know it's not like the best title ever, but you know what I mean. It's probably stuck. But explain that.
I was saying, like, I got kicked out, bro. I'm the only person, obviously, since Bronson that got kicked out. But they took him back. They actually wouldn't let me back. They actually took him back once. Wow. It's true, don't they? They actually took him back once. With me, they wouldn't even take me back for one night because I had to do the trial for what happened there. Wow. But yeah, I got found. Well, because they couldn't take me back and that, they acquitted it. But you got me. There was things on the internet as well coming up with a cover up and that. I was no way I was going guilty, man. I was more than happy to go to court because I knew the papers. Obviously, it'd been in front news of the Sun and all that, like, and I knew they were trying to play it down. But a lot more of that will come out in the future. We've got paperwork and a few things with Amazon and all that. I still got the paperwork, but it was sort of crazy, like going there. Broadmoor was just surreal. It was surreal going there, bro. Did you get what I'm sort of saying? I still remember that journey going there and that, mate. It was just sort of like at such a young age as well. I was the youngest one there at that time as well.
You were See, that was another thing. You were 21. I was going to ask you, how old do you have to be? Like, surely, like, there's a cut-off to where you're a young offender, or is it like, for instance, can you be 18 and go Broadmoor?
I should imagine so, bro.
Really?
Yeah, I should imagine. They would have to done something really bad at that age to go there, bro. But at that time, I didn't meet anyone that was younger than me at that time and that. Do you know what I mean? But then when I got to Ashworth, the place I got kicked out of Broadmoor, I started noticing there's a lot of younger people in the end. So I think they are making it more. Do you know what I mean? If people are a bit more lively, maybe it's the generation now, maybe a bit more lively, a bit younger than us. They was getting a bit more. Because when I started it, it was like 24, 25, 26, I started seeing like a few 23-year-olds. Not so much in Broadmoor, but at Ashworth, maybe up north, a bit more with the mental health. Because they class like personality disorder, is it now? Or was it that used to just be prison? So
do you not feel like it could be perhaps a bit like overkill to send someone that young to a prison? Like, I guess obviously they've been assessed and they've been deemed dangerous or whatever to suit the criteria to go to that kind of prison. But like almost like I feel like it's a neglect of power putting such a young guy who's a vulnerable person in such, as you say, hell on earth.
Hell on earth, bro.
Which people know what it, like the system who is sending you there know what it is. To do that seems like a mess up. Like there's got to be better ways of dealing with things like that, no?
100%, bro. But 100%, especially way Broadmoor at the time. I know there's been after what happened. There's been investigations and all that. They have looked into things. There's all things on the internet and that about it. But it is sad. I mean, it is sad that you just send a 21-year-old to them sort of places. Obviously the prison. But then again, it's sort of like I was in the wrong for doing all the things that I did to go there as well. Do you know what I mean? It is sort of both sides. But you got to remember, 21. I'm not a killer in that. Next thing, bro, I'm sitting there with all these serial killers and these class A wrong-uns and all that, and then I got stabbed at hot water, and then
That's what I was going to say. Like, how are they like? Obviously, you've come in like the mentally unstable, big grown men. 21. Let's be real. Like we're kind of men, but we ain't.
No.
Do you know what I mean? And people mature at different stages. Like what I mean? How are they treating you?
Well, I was a big 21. I don't know. Have you seen the Broadmoor picture of me?
No.
I only recently put it out. I have to show you.
Well,
after.
what we'll do, right? You send it over to me. I'll put it on screen or whatever.
So you'll see it on the screen now. So look at me now. You think this geezer's done all that? You see this picture? Listen, I was like 13.5 stone. Oh wow! Listen, I was just a little musclehead. So I was a bit, quite difficult to handle physically as well. Do you get what I'm sort of saying? So yeah, and I was just a bit of an headache for them.
Really? So you were hassling them, kind of thing.
A bit of both. Obviously, everyone knows. Obviously, I had the thing with the Al Qaeda lads, innit? Obviously, Yeah,
I remember now.
Yeah,
Do you want to touch on that a little bit?
Yeah, of course. You know, so obviously in prison I got severe. Obviously in prison I got attacked. That's why I got the gold teeth. My ribs, my socket got done by a few people. It was for absolutely no reason. Bro. I got a tattoo with Tottenham on my leg.
Are you a Tottenham guy?
Yeah, I'm
You
Tottenham.
Tottenham support?
Yeah.
So am I, bro.
Yes.
Do you know what the thing is?
Yeah.
Like, people are gonna quiz me now on other like.
You're
podcasts.
gonna lose fans of that, bro.
No, do you know what the thing is? I love Tottenham, yeah.
Yeah. But I support all the teams. I love all the teams.
No, I just ain't got time to follow football. But
Yeah.
Tottenham is the team for me.
Yeah, I like Tottenham.
London's
Even though we having
white,
a shit
bro.
one at the video, we love Tottenham. I had Dante Hawkins on. He's a big Spurs, but I don't
Oh,
know on
sick.
my podcast. Yeah, that was an interesting one. But where was we? I got lost there.
Oh, because of your Tottenham.
So because of that, yeah, it's a bulldog. Obviously, I love boxing. Everyone knows my story. Obviously, you know, but obviously I'm leading up to my boxing, so I love boxing, and it says Tottenham underneath it. So this was about. Liam, what year did all that EDL sort of start? What was it? Was it 2012 or something? It was about 2012. You had all these geezers going around the balaclavas and all these marches, far right thing. They called themselves an EDL and that at the time and that, yeah. So no one knew that. Who was the lead?
Tommy Robinson.
Tommy. So he was like the leader, but no one knew who this geezer was at the time. It was just all in papers at the minute. This far right thing and all that. It was all based in Luton. So I don't know about all this shit and that, bro. And then I remember these like extremist guys. I wasn't like I was in one of the higher secures. I was in so it was at the window, and I remember he was sort of saying, "Oh, you know, he must have seen me come in the shower and he's seen that tattoo on my leg or whatever." And he's started quizzing me out the window. He's like, "Where you from, bro?" I was like, "I'm from Langley in Eastbourne, mate, South Coast." He's like, "You sure, bro?" Oh, yeah, kind of sure, bro. I'm from, you know what I mean? Like, yeah, I know where I'm from. Yeah. You sure you're not from Luton? Is it Luton, bro? Bro, I'm from the South Coast. I don't know what fucking Luton is, bro. You know what I mean? Like, you fucking, my geography definitely weren't my thing. I don't know about all that, mate. Like, come on. But I didn't really. I think they knew, man. I think in there they just get sort of boredom, mate. I think there was a lot of like all that sort of politics stuff was happening outside. There was a lot of it. And again, I just think they did that out of boredom. But anyway, 4 of them, 1, 2, 3, 4 of them come in my cell. I was at the bottom back of my cell writing a letter, which I had to fucking read. It was like one of them long letters as well, like 3 pages.
You nearly finished it.
I had to write all that again like a week later after I come back to the hospital and that, bro. I had to rewrite that because it was all like bloody and scratch. But anyway, they come in and they went to work on me. They went to work on me. They did my ribs and they smashed my teeth out and they went in on me. Wow. So obviously I still held a grudge in that. You know what I mean? Yeah. Obviously I was very sore.
Can I stop you and just ask real quick? Like, you're saying the Al Qaeda guys, what were they like? They were
there was the extremists. They was all there for terror charges. Yeah, so but there's one guy who didn't come in the cell, but they all seemed to sort of like be up his arse a bit, and his name was Haroon. Now Haroon was, do you ever remember Hamza the Hook?
Yeah.
So this Haroon was Hamza the Hook's right hand man. So they was like setting up camps north of the country and all that. He was very like, he was, you know, a small dude and all that, but he was very like, you know, very powerful in that extremist extremist world, because they was like, setting up camps. He was very high up. I didn't know all this. I don't look all that shit. I don't follow all that. You know what I mean? Like, I'm just a fucking cancel kid from Langley East one. You know what I mean? I don't follow any of that sort of shit. So and then anyway, I was just pissed off. I got attacked. It don't matter who attacked me, bro. It don't matter if it was Muslim, Christian, whatever. People, they got me. I was still sore, and I believed he sort of instigated it for him to do it. So when I went to Broadmoor, Haroon went going to Broadmoor because America was trying to extradite him, because I think they did in the end, but they was trying to extradite him. But Broadmoor, he was playing the mental health, and Broadmoor was holding on to him because, you know, when he was going over to America, I think what's that place in America? Like Katama Bay.
That's in Cuba. Is that Cuba?
That's where they. That's where they
took them from there to there.
That's where they were trying to get him. So obviously he don't want to be going there, bro. Because
it's game over.
Yeah, you can imagine. You can imagine what goes on out there, bro. Like, I wouldn't want to go there, mate. You know what I mean, let's say like. But anyway, I know his lifeline was based in mental health card. So obviously he's gone to Broadmoor. I've then gone to Broadmoor, and I remember him. We wasn't on the same ward as each other, but we would go to the same sports hall together, play cricket. Now, I was still very sore about what happened. You remember, my teeth, bruv, it was for no reason. It was completely unprovoked. Exactly. Do you know what I mean? Like, I went into all that fucking shit that was going on and that. Like, that's not me, man. You know, like I said, it don't matter who it was. Anyone who sort of tagged me up, I was, you know what I mean? I was going to tag them back.
Yeah.
And so every week I think I'm gonna do him in it. And obviously when I get the bat, when I get my turn on the cricket bat, I'm gonna weigh him in. But it was like, oh no, you know what? I've just got to Broadmoor. I should just leave it, innit? Like, and then obviously I got badly attacked anyway when I'm not on Broadmoor with the hot water and all that. Matthew Quezada. And so that sort of delayed it anyway. Then sort of after that, I had another occasion with somebody. Anyway, it goes cricket, and every time I say to myself, oh, do you know what? I should just get on with the sentence and I'll just leave it. I'm just going to cause more problems and that. But then I'd see him down there again. I think, no, I'm going to fucking do him. Like, and I just keep get back and forth. And then in the end, I decided I was just going to leave it. And we was playing cricket. Well, do you know how heavy a cricket ball is?
Yes.
Yeah.
Bro, that'll kill a person if it. Yeah.
Bro, so anyway, like we was on the same team. So he's batting. And yeah, so the geezer's, I'm not far behind him. He's batting, you get someone behind, innit? No, he's not batting, he's bowling.
Yeah.
So he's bowling, I'm sitting there not far behind him in case the bat anyway. So the geezer's the other geezer he's bowled it to, hit the ball and it's come my way. And I've got this ball, man. I don't know what come over me. Haroom's gone, quick, ball, pass the ball. But I bounced it off his head, innit?
Oh, like
yeah,
that.
so I went in. So that caused a lot of aggro for me inside Broadmoor then. That had like a big trigger event.
Did it almost seem like from the outside, but did you give any signs that you didn't like the brother before you actually smacked him with the ball? Because I can imagine if it was like that, then that's going to further make them think you're like,
yeah, like I kept myself like into sort of Broadmoor and that. Do you know what I mean? There was a couple of lads I sort of mixed with there, but it's a scary place, bro. Do you know what I mean? You got to be on the ball and all that lot. You don't know what these guys and that are thinking and that. Like he didn't know I was probably thinking that. So I had it happen to me. You know, I did it to someone. But obviously my reason comes back. You know, I didn't just do that for any reason. I done that because in my heart, I know he orchestrated them boys to come in myself for no reason. If I was part of all that shit, and I get it, fair enough. That's past the parcel of all that.
You was hurt.
I didn't cause them any problems, bro. I never got onto them. Exactly. And you just come in myself and beat. Do you know what I mean? It wouldn't just beat up, bro. They went in on me, bro, for literally for no reason. If we had an altercation, there was an argument or something, I get it. All right, that's past the parcel. Bro, I was just there doing my fucking porridge, bro. You know what I mean? I'm already looking at Broadmoor. I've got enough shit going on, and then I come in and get my teeth smashed in, my ribs broke, my socket done.
Yeah, I understand.
You know what I'm saying? Like, that was just my thinking at the time. So I was very sore, and so you know, and obviously you got to remember like the size of me at that time and that as well. It did, yeah. Haroom, it didn't work out for him in the end. Do you know what I mean? Karma got him back.
Thank you for listening to Human Monsters. Bye for now.